I made a video last week ranking the characters and how well they perform in solo play, and my only regret in that video was putting the Raider at 6th. I should have switched him out for the Guardian, whom I placed at 4th, because in that video I was very dismissive of the things that he did well, and I hyper-focused on his shortcomings and how much better he could be with just a few more tweaks. It was mainly just wishful thinking in hopes that he would get buffed because Raider is one of my favorites to play. Now, one major thing I overlooked is this character's ease of use. It does not need much setup, doesn't require good RNG for the most part, you just pick up and go. Now, I do think characters like Duchess and the Guardian have higher potential upsides, but that's only when you get certain types of specific buffs, relics, or weapons. When it just comes to straight up plug and play, it doesn't get easier than the Raider. Unless you're the Wilder, because yeah, he does basically everything that you really need. And yeah, the existence of the Wilder is another reason why I valued the Raider a bit less, because with almost every weapon in the game, the Wilder just does more damage while also having the higher damaging ult, a better passive, and a better dodge roll. But there are certain things that the Raider does that also makes him easy to pick up and play, but it just requires a different playstyle and different things to look out for. Now, like all of my breakdowns, we are going to start off with the scalings and the stats. He has the second most health in the game, therefore you have a very decent chance of fighting those health boosting buffs. I had a run today where I found 4 of them. Like, look at this health bar, it is ridiculous. He also has the second most stamina, he has non-existent synergy with spells and dexterity weapons, but a big boy S-scaling in strength, which pairs perfectly with him having the most poise in the game too. At least thematically speaking, poise is like kind of equally useful for every single character. Now, him having a really good strength scaling and a bad dexterity scaling isn't the greatest thing in this game, because almost every weapon type has somewhat of a dex scaling too, and it's to the point that characters like the Wilder will do more damage even with strength-based weapons. Like the Zweihander or the Guts' Greatsword, you'll pretty much get just as much damage, if not more, with a Wilder. Especially if they're elemental infused, because yeah, the Raider gets a terrible faith and intelligence scaling. So this pretty much only limits him to using larger types of weapons like great hammers, colossal weapons, great axes, which is still perfectly fine because those are some of the best weapon types in the entire game due to their high damage output, high stance damage, and specifically for things like great axes and great hammers, they don't even have that slow of a moveset. In fact, their light attacks are just as fast as a greatsword light attack. And when playing the Raider, you are more likely to find these weapon types. So even if you wanted to run those weapon types for other characters, it's going to be a lot more rare. Now, unfortunately, the Raider gets a unique moveset for these weapon types. Now, normally, unique movesets are pretty good, but in the case of the Raider, no, they're not. They're somehow slower than like normal colossal weapon movesets, which already those are just not as good as other strength counterparts for the exact reason that they're slow. So having a moveset that's even slower than that, with arguably worse hit detection, no, not good. Like, the main reason people use colossal weapons in general is because of those really good charged heavy attacks. Things like the Giant Crusher, the Blood Fiend's Arm, the Great Club. And the funny thing is, when you're using this particular character, you don't even get those good heavy attacks. Now, thankfully, the quick jumping attacks and the guard counters are still there. The two-handed running heavy attack is honestly amazing and can proc those multi-hit damaging buffs and multi-hit damage negation buffs really well. I don't even want to talk about the heavy attack though, you know, like the most important part of a strength weapon. Like, yeah, it's so bad. It's really bad. But yeah, this horrible moveset extends to both the great axes and the great hammers as well. So it takes the weapons that are as fast as a greatsword and makes them slower than a colossal weapon. Now, thankfully, this moveset does not extend to the power stancing combo, which once again, for great axes and great hammers, those movesets are surprisingly fast for how much damage they output. Colossal weapon power stancing combos I don't really like as much unless you are spamming jumping attacks, but even then in this game where you can't really pick what buffs you want to run, it's better to just use light attacks when you have a longer opening, especially because of the stamina cost. Like, things just consume a lot of stamina in this game, and large weapon power stancing combos can definitely get you killed. And that's part of the reason why I typically prefer two-handing strength weapons, because of, yeah, the stamina issue, and that you can actually stance break faster when two-handing compared to power stancing, unless you're the Raider. So my weapon recommendations for this guy would be power stancing great axes or great hammers. The great axes do more damage, but the great hammers do more stance damage, and they do striking damage, which is really good for those Crystallians, Skeletons, or the Deathrite birds. So I typically would gravitate more towards the great hammers. But honestly, just go with whatever the game gives you more of. Even the colossal weapons, which I still don't really care as much as those other two classes that I mentioned. Because yeah, great axes can do basically just as much damage as colossal weapons, but just have faster movesets, and that stance damage difference isn't really that noticeable if you're just going to have a faster moveset. Now, if you don't really care for power stancing, especially early game when the stamina cost can be really bad, you can just grab yourself a colossal sword, like a Zweihander. And unironically, another weapon I love to use with the Raider is the club. Yep, just the regular club. It is the only hammer that gets an S scaling in strength. Like, this thing sucks with every other character except for this guy. And this is a great low stamina option that could also stance break faster than larger weapons, because yeah, the hammer heavy attack is really fast while outputting more stance damage than a great axe heavy attack. Like, hammers are probably right behind things like iron balls and star fists in terms of how good they are at stance breaking, especially when taking into account the spiked club, because this one actually gets a faster heavy attack than all the other hammers. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't get an S scaling in strength like the regular club does, but it does get to bleed, so that can be another weapon you can look out for. Okay, now to talk about his abilities. I'm going to talk on both the passive and the character skill, because you can't really talk about one without mentioning the other. His character skill is this stomping attack into a headbutt that has like ridiculous amounts of hyper armor. It's pretty much like using Endure, but you just send enemies flying and do some decent stance damage in return. And if you've seen my videos about Endure, you would know how free this actually makes some fights. If there's any attack in the game that is hard to dodge, just click this button. You'll tank it easily, not get staggered, and actually do an attack in return. And this only gets a 12-second cooldown, 10 seconds with a +3 cooldown relic. Now, the passive ability actually boosts this even further by not letting you die throughout the animation. So even if you're on 1 HP and use this skill, you can pretty much never die to a regular attack, at least based on my testing. Also, the passive does let this skill get buffed to do this like insane charging attack. Now, to get to this attack, you have to take damage at any point. Doesn't have to be during the animation of the skill. As long as you take 850 damage, then your body gets like all steamy, kind of like Horaloo style. And then the next time that you use this skill, it'll do this like cool palm blast AoE that does roughly 50% more damage and a lot more stance damage than the regular skill. Now, the survivability aspect of this skill is insane. The stance damage potential is great too. It is quick and easy to use, although with most skills, you kind of have to wait for the recovery animation to finish, and sometimes with these like larger weapons, it can be pretty annoying just waiting for that recovery animation. But I also just do not like how inconsistent it is to actually get to this fully charging effect. 850 damage is a lot of damage for like the first 3/4 of an expedition. So it's pretty much a passive that you only really benefit once you get later into the game. And even then, I just wish I had the option to charge it or not. Now, I don't think you should be able to charge it on demand. I did used to have that opinion, but this attack literally staggers Night Lord bosses the same way an ultimate attack does. So it needs to have a prerequisite. I just don't really like the one that they gave it. But at the very least, if they were to change something, I would like the option to just like keep the fully charging effect for later if I wanted to, because I don't really like how it's not really in your control and how you acquire the buff. Also, small little side note, this skill doesn't really work with the partial HP restoration relic as well, which that's kind of unfortunate. Now, as for the ultimate, Totem Stellar, this summons a big giant tombstone to serve as protection or temporary high ground for 20 seconds. Now, using it as protection is honestly super inconsistent and can be buggy too sometimes when enemies get trapped inside of it. In my opinion, it is like more annoying than it is helpful, mostly speaking at least. So the way I actually like to use this ultimate is just for a damaging AoE. Now, compared to all the other damaging AoE ults, this one quite literally gets the worst damage. Guardian's ult, even Revenant's ult with the Ghost Flame relic can just do more damage. But at least it actually does do damage and have the ability to stagger enemies. But most importantly, this actually does give you and your allies a damage boost. Upon using the ult for 30 seconds, you get a 15% damage boost to all of your sources, which is great. Like, that's honestly a really good secondary effect for an ult. And there are some relics that can actually make this ultimate even better as well, which I'm just going to touch on that one next, all of his relics. There are 3 in particular that can boost his ultimate art. There is one that boosts your poise by 50% when standing nearby the totem. Kind of useless, should have been damage negation instead. There is one that gives you 20% of your health back for every enemy killed nearby the totem. Also kind of useless because that's only really good for trash mobs, and if you're using this ult around the trash mobs, they're probably already dead. It should have just healed based on hits instead. Another relic actually boosts the duration of the totem from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. Now, as I mentioned, this totem can just get in your way more than it can actually help, but this relic also extends the duration of the buff from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, which just having more of that 15% damage is really good, but I still wouldn't really run it unless it was in combination with other good perks. Like if all three of these perks were together in one relic, then I would run it. But his most important and best relic by far is the one that gives you damage and stamina boost when taking damage in the skill. So any part throughout that skill animation where you pretty much just have like 99% damage negation, you will gain a 10% damage boost and a 20% stamina boost for 20 seconds. And the character skill cooldown is only 12 seconds. Like you can pretty much always have this buff active. So yeah, this is the most important one. And in terms of other buffs outside of the character specific ones, there is also another buff that gives you damage when you get hit. And this is a 15% damage boost that lasts 10 seconds. And that stacks with a relic, that stacks with the ult, and you can have all these things together and it's output ridiculous amounts of damage. Now the next most important relic buff is getting bonus stance damage on power stancing attacks, because as I mentioned earlier, with most raider builds, you're probably going to end up doing some type of power stancing combo. There is the Evergel completions boosting your damage relic buff, which is just insane. If you guys checked out my Wilder video from a couple days ago, you'll know exactly how well this can perform. And also once again, the partial HP regen on post damaging attacks. You pretty much run this with almost every single character. Honestly, the Raider does have one of the weaker pairings with this particular relic, because even though it doesn't actually work with the skill, and with how much easier it is to actually get your health back when using quicker types of weapons, it's not going to do the best, but it's still going to be some more health when you take damage. And it is going to synergize pretty well after using the skill, because the build does involve around you taking a lot of damage. Anyway, overall thoughts is that I was a dumbass for putting this into the B tier, and that he is at least an A tier, but I still would like for him to see a buff to that unique moveset, and also just not have it apply to great hammers and great axes. I wish they could also slightly rework the skill to make that fully charge effect be more consistent, and have it be in our own terms, not just always leaving it up for chance. But other than that, he is like a perfect and fun character to use that is extremely easy to pick up and play, but he still has some nuance enough to min-max him pretty well too. I do feel that he isn't as useful in a team-based format as he is in solo, but his damage output, survivability, and just having his presence give the ability to spawn in more larger strength weapons like great hammers or great axes can be very welcomed on almost any team. It definitely would be one of the characters I would recommend for beginners or people just trying to learn boss movesets. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. As always, let me know what your opinions are down in the comments below. And please do like and subscribe. I only have 2 more character guides left for the Guardian and the Recluse. And I still have to make my solo guide for this character as well. So if you do want to see some more solo-based gameplay around the Raider, maybe tomorrow or the day after, I will drop a video based on that. And yeah, catch you guys around. See yous.